thank you all for joining us in these challenging times and also the times of opportunities. And this is why we are here, to see where are the opportunities in these challenges. And let me just repeat something we heard yesterday, that our future starts today and now. I know you have heard that many times, but do you really think about that also in every day? The only thing that exists is now. And it's on us really to decide what we do with this. So I hope we use this opportunity to discuss with our distinguished guests. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Dunja Mladenić, a researcher in computer science, artificial intelligence at Jozef Stefan Institute, leading Department of Artificial Intelligence here in Ljubljana. And I would like to thank the organizers and the colleagues from Facebook for supporting that we have this panel today and the opportunity to have distinguished guests here and discuss. And you will see as we go with the questions that our panel actually brings together representatives of 3 countries which have been in EU presidency in these challenging times. We have representative of businesses and research around the table now. And as we know, how much EU citizens are really putting forward importance of human rights, of solidarity, of compliance with legal rules, this is something which will be underlying our discussion today as we talk about EU regulations on digitalization and AI. And there is just one thing more that I would like to say before, to put in the context of this event. Yesterday, from politicians, we heard about that politics is about truth and serving. At least this is what I catch. There were also other things for sure. But as a scientist, I would like to say that also science is about revealing truth and about serving. And we are serving, society, serving the planet on which we are, which is hosting us. And we would really like also to use the regulations to help us in that. Regulations which are now actually, for the first time, being shaped, regulations for AI within EU. And the question for the panel today is also, how is this influencing us and the development and innovation? So we hope that this panel will contribute a little bit also to revealing what is behind, what is the truth, what is the way how we can serve each other and the society better, and how we can make the right steps into unlocking the potential for digital Europe. And it is about digitalization, it is about artificial intelligence, because this is something that is really touching our life and integrating in our life today in ways that maybe we are aware of, but many people who are exposed to it are not aware of. So we feel that it is also our responsibility to take some steps and discuss it at least. For the first time of AI in EU being shaped, in AI Act, we're discussing a lot about risks, about AI systems and different ways of risks they can have, categorizing them. These are the steps in the direction of seeing how to make AI more freely spread, at least from the view of researchers. This is kind of giving us freedom, so we can develop because we don't have to care so much about the usage because there is someone else, there are regulations which are taking care of that. But of course, they should be also compliant with not restricting innovation, not restricting research, not restricting businesses. And this is something we would like also to invite our panelists to help us a little bit shed light on that. And just to tell you a technical detail, for us, whenever you would like to speak, you have to press the button and the mic becomes red. You know that. This is our technical instructions from back there. And we will go into the round. So the idea here is that we have 3 rounds of questions, and each of you will have chance to comment on the first question, on the second, and maybe they are not exactly the same for all of you because you represent different kind of spheres of players in this area. So let me start, and then at the end, I hope we will have time for some questions from the audience. So if you have questions, get ready at the end when we get through. So next to me is a Portuguese Secretary of State for the Digital Transition, André de Aragão Azevedo. Welcome here. And the first question for you is that, so Portugal has recently concluded EU presidency and you made some steps in digitalization. So if you can share with us what are you the most proud of, what are your plans for the future, what is your strategy, and also how do you see how important is openness of data flow, openness of education on digitalization and AI, investment in that into your country?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Let me salute my colleagues of panel. In fact, for us in Portugal, the political priority was clearly identified, and it is totally aligned with promoting this agenda of digitalization of our country. We have defined a strategy, an action plan for the country for the next coming years. We have created a specific member of the government just to deal with this in order to make sure that we were able to deliver. During our presidency, we have also clearly identified the digital agenda as a top priority, and we have basically assumed these 3 priorities in terms of digital. The first one around using the digitalization to make sure that we were able to recover from the pandemic crisis, but also to being able to somehow make the transition for a better economic model that was more based on innovation and on technology. The second thing was around the talent, the war on talent, and the need to find the skills to respond to the kind of challenges we are facing. And the third one was around values and digital principles that must be aligned with the kind of values and individual rights that we want to protect and that result from our own constitution and also based on our European model of looking into the society. We have also organized 2 major events aligned with this digital agenda. The first one was totally focused on entrepreneurship. We do believe on the importance of startups to be the economic engine of this transition. And so we were able to reach a consensus between the 27 member states in order to find a political convergence on giving top priority to the importance of startups. We have identified some standards in order to become a startup nation, and the idea is based on those 8 standards we are able to progress and to eliminate the excessive fragmentation of the European startup ecosystem. And together with this, the Portuguese government launched an initiative that was to create this new structure, this new body, the European one, just to deal with startups, because we felt when we compared to other geographies and other competitors that Europe definitely needed a new structure that would look into this area of startups and make a difference. So we have launched it together with the European Commission, and now just today I had a chance to meet with my colleague from Slovenia and also from Czech Republic in order to formally incorporate in the coming months of November this new structure that will have the head office in Lisbon, but it's supposed to work for the 27 member states to align the strategies. And we were also able to, in the second momentum, in the second event, we were able to, during the digital assembly, we were able to also to call the attention to the importance of values and the digital rights. We know that typically the speed of law is slower than the speed of the market, the speed of technology, but there is a momentum in which it required some kind of political intervention, and we felt that probably this was the momentum to make the kickoff of this agenda. So we have proposed, and it was signed by the 27 member states, the Lisbon Declaration, that is an initial contribution to this importance of promoting what we call the European way of doing business based on an ethical commitment, and that we believe makes a difference when compared to other geographies. And I do believe, and it's more my personal belief, that probably the Europe hasn't been able to position itself internationally with this strong asset, which is this ethical commitment that makes Europe the trustful partner when we talk about digital. And we can always recall the great example around GDPR, in which Europe set the trend and the new standard for the world in terms of privacy. And now every other geographies that in the beginning were a little bit skeptic about it are now following and aligning with the same standard. The second part of your question was about the importance of openness. Obviously, in the digital world, in a digital market which is by nature global, we cannot just look into our internal market. The talent just goes around and doesn't look to boundaries. We need to forget this idea of physical and political boundaries. We are competing against each other, but also we need to partner in this war on talent, in this war for being more competitive. And of course, when in our national strategy, it's all about being open, attracting, using our assets to attract more investment, to attract more talent, because we know that knowledge is strategic for that new model we want to promote.
Anything on digital education?
Yes. At the national level, you mean? Yes, we have launched, we call it Escola Digital, which basically means digital school, which wants to universalize the use of technology in all disciplines and in all areas, with a huge investment of $500 million to make sure that we really change the paradigm of learning and teaching in Portugal based on technology, instruments and tools. So this is already in place. We have already delivered $500 million of the computers, and now we are universalizing and making the other changes around skilling, around investing in connectivity and communications. We were already quite okay in those areas, but we want to reinforce, because that's the kind of environment that each student will find when they reach the labor market.
Excellent, thank you. So let us jump to the Czech Deputy Minister of Industry and Trade, Mr. Petr Očko, with a very similar question. One is your views and investment in digital education and AI education, but also about your ambition to become a European model for AI, and how do you plan to do that? What for you is the most important towards that steps and international collaboration?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting panel, and congratulations to this event, because I'm here for 2 days, and it's really amazing. So many interesting discussions and meetings that I really think this is a really productive event. So that was for beginning, and from the Czech perspective, actually, I will start with artificial intelligence from several points of view. As you rightly mentioned, for the Czech Republic, as definitely for many countries in the world, including Slovenia, but in Czech Republic, definitely artificial intelligence belongs to governmental priorities. We have a national strategy that was actually prepared in 2018-2019 based on like deep survey and research on what is the potential, what are the possibilities in technological, regulatory, and also human resources area, and so on and so on. I think the strategy is quite well designed, and we are trying to really consequently implement it in the area of technology, in the area of education, labor market, security, and several other areas. We have special council on artificial intelligence that actually includes main stakeholders, including Minister of Education, including, of course, the stakeholders from the business and academia, and it works, I would say, quite well. And we try to be active also on the regulatory level. And I wanted to say a few words on that, because I think this is something we should discuss here. I was mentioning it also on the previous panels already. From the beginning, we were discussing actually the approach to AI regulation with our stakeholders, and we were actually happy that for I don't know 4 or 5 years there is like a serious debate on AI regulation on EU level. There was communication from European Parliament. I personally was very happy for in 2019 for the document that I think in that time had nothing similar you could find anywhere in the world. In 2019, it was when the guidelines for trustworthy AI were published. That were actually, I think it was the first actually structured package of principles that should guide development of and usage of artificial intelligence based on human-centric approach and fundamental rights. And I think in this Europe is actually leader in the world, because we actually have strong feeling that we should invest into human-centric approach. I don't say that in the US or other parts of the world they do not do it at all, but I think this is something EU was doing very well with participation. Of course, EU is it's member states, so with participation of many of us from member states. So up to this, it is okay, and also what we have liked very much was the European Commission publication of coordinated plan on artificial intelligence. That was like, I guess it was the end of 2018. That was also a very good step to coordinate activities in artificial intelligence in the EU. So I think that this all was quite well going, and we were very curious on what will happen in regulation. And even before the Commission published a white paper on artificial intelligence in the beginning of 2020, Czech Republic has produced, we have prepared a non-paper on regulation of artificial intelligence that was actually saying a few basic things that we really like, the human-centric approach based on everything I have mentioned. And we need to set some red flags and say what are the dangers of artificial intelligence, and where the regulation should be actually heavy and strict. But and this is the point I wanted to say. In the other areas, the regulation shouldn't be so strict, so heavy. Should allow for innovation for startups, of SMEs, and shouldn't jeopardize innovation environment in the EU, because the worst thing we could do for development of AI here in the EU is to kill the innovative spirit, especially in the small companies, startups, and as we already mentioned, startups here as necessary future of regulation of EU innovative environment. So why I'm saying that we were very unhappy when we saw the proposal of European Commission for regulation of artificial intelligence. Actually, as I said in the beginning, we actually are very much devoted to the deployment of artificial intelligence in many areas, including human resources, including security, and here in the EU, we want to support research and so on. But I think such a heavy regulation that was proposed, that is a very horizontal regulation, is a good way to kill innovation spirit in this area. And there will be long discussions, including during the Czech presidency of the EU, that is coming quickly and will happen in the second half of 2022. I'm not sure if there is any possibility to do much about that, because the proposal is on the table, and I think this is something that will not help us. And I was very happy to talk with you, with our Portuguese colleagues on European Startup Nation Alliance and all the Startup Nation activities here in Europe. And this is important, but we can do everything in this to support startups. But if we have bad regulation, heavy regulation, strict regulation, bureaucratic regulation, then any measure that we will develop in the alliance will not be efficient, will not work, because of the fact that we have bad regulation. And if this regulation is approved as it was proposed, it will mean that any startup that wants to come to the market with AI-based application will have to have several lawyers that will actually help him to achieve like compliance with all the rules. And if you are a small startup, you have not so many money for lawyers that are usually very, very expensive. So we can speak very much about supporting startups, but we definitely shouldn't forget about having startup-friendly regulation. So sorry for being a little bit long, but I wanted to try to explain how the context that we know we want a human-centric AI regulation here in the EU, but we think that the balance was shifted to something that will kill innovation spirit here in Europe. So actually, this is something that we do not welcome so much.
Thank you very much also for sharing this views on regulation, which actually is going to be a little bit more looked in the detail in the second round. But thank you. Now we have a little bit a head start on that also. Let me now move to the Vice President for Public Policy at Facebook, Mr. Markus Reinisch, and who is here representing businesses from my viewpoint. So let's hear, what is the Facebook current approach to artificial intelligence? How is it used in your platform? What are you doing about the data and user privacy?
Yeah, so look, if you think about artificial intelligence, it just pretty much permeates everything. You know, every service, or pretty much every service we use. If you want to have directions on a map, if you want to engage with a chatbot on an online shopping site, if you want to, I don't know, if you get recommendations for film, for music, I mean, it's all driven by artificial intelligence. And I think if we sit here in a year's time, you know, it will be probably quicker to list all the user experiences that do not include artificial intelligence. So it's there. It's not something, you know, that's around the corner, the future. And then if you think a bit about it from a commercial perspective, you know, the artificial intelligence is a core function of Facebook. I mean, most of you, I would assume, know how it works. You know, the way that posts are presented, how they are ranked on the newsfeed, is driven by an algorithm. You know, it is the core of the company. And what's quite often underestimated is a useful artificial intelligence within Facebook that is probably one of the most sophisticated area of artificial intelligence, and this is to protect the integrity of the platform. So it's how do we detect, how do we remove hate speech, how do we detect, how do we remove misinformation on the platform? That is very much driven by artificial intelligence. So what you see here is that there is clearly an economic promise. You know, what is technology bring, but there's a social promise, and think about what artificial intelligence did to navigate us through the pandemic, through COVID. You know, when one functionality of it is, or one use case is, where you have population density maps, and where you can send relief, where you have information about also COVID likelihoods in areas. So it is a social tool as much as an economic tool. And I sort of really sort of believe very much in this social promise that the platform brings. And it's also not sort of the magic dust that's sprinkled over everything else. It's not a peripheral thing. If you have a popular platform like ours and like many others, you need artificial intelligence. Think about the billions of items of content that are posted every day. You know, we have tens of thousands of human content reviewers, but even they can never go through this. So it needs artificial intelligence. And interestingly enough, actually, that a lot of the human content reviewers get recommendation from artificial intelligence what to look into. So it's not there's artificial intelligence and there are humans. It's actually a much closer symbiosis. So that's how we practically use artificial intelligence. If you look forward, you know, that's obviously one use case of the here and now. One big challenge, one big risk that we see is deepfakes. Just to give you an example where the journey is going here, you know, and where we work very, very strongly with partners so what we basically do is we're creating data sets that detect deepfakes. And then we share these data sets with academics, with other companies, to train their algorithms and to help them to identify and spot it. So this is, you know, really where we see the application goes if you just move away from the pure commercial application and sort of the user-friendly application of artificial intelligence. But I'll just go back what I said at the beginning, you know, this is something that touches all our lives. It permeates all our lives. And that also means that you, as the users, have to have absolute trust and confidence into this. And that brings enormous responsibilities to a company like ours. And actually any company that deals with artificial intelligence, any technology company, and you know, the definition of technology company is a very wide one, to create this trust with users. And that means that we have to be transparent about what we do, how the products work, how data is used. And it's really at the core of it, because if there's no trust, then obviously people will not use our services, but it will not help the growth of such an important technology that is life transforming. And we have, you know, we do stuff obviously there. I said again, I'm assuming that you all to some extent Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp users, but when you, for example, go into your news feed, you see at every post, you have these 3 dots at the top of every post, and you click on that, then you have the function of why do I see this post, or why do I see this ad, where we try to explain what is actually driving the algorithm, what are the key parameters that make you see this information. And you will find out for most of the posts, it's just the people you know, just the people you interact with. It is really very much driven by your circle of friends. So that's how we have to be transparent. But we also, I think, have to be transparent towards the outside world, towards regulators, towards academia, towards researchers, because they need to understand what we do. And there's something called model cards. You might not have heard about this, but this is a documentation of our models, of our AI models, of the process that sits behind this, so that other people can really use this to inform their thinking, other researchers, other competitors, in how to build their own AI model. So that's I think really important as well. And then the last point on it is fairness. I think there's a responsibility on businesses to build fairness into the product, from conception to development to delivery of the product, which is very, very hard, because it is not always predictable how algorithms affect various groups of society. So this is has to be a very deliberate act of a developer, of a company that develops algorithms. Is sort of the built-in fairness of that. And there's you know, a lot that is going on here. First, the challenge, by the way, the challenge is just an insufficient set of data sets. You know, if you can only train an algorithm on something, on a certain number or critical amount of data. If you don't have that, it is really, really difficult to build a use case for a smaller group, for a minority group. So there's a challenge, and you have to proactively counteract that. And again, many processes, many products that we have where our developers sort of can plug in their algorithms, their work, to test them for what the potential impact are for various groups. So I probably stop there, but it's, you know, commercial application, it's a societal application, and we really have to look in the future how we make sure that algorithms meet all these standards that I met, and fairness is the one that we are the most concentrated about.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of these insights. And we move to the representative of researchers here, who is at Jozef Stefan Institute and Unesco International Research Center on AI, Marko Grobelnik. And the first question, Marko, for you relates to you being involved in some of the most successful hubs of AI in Slovenia. And the question is, how it happened, how do you see, what are the competitive advantages of Slovenia? Why is AI so widespread and so strong in Slovenia? And what do you think about the, what would really help researchers in this discussion about regulations? What would be useful for researchers? We heard, for the businesses, for SMEs. How about researchers and research perspective?
Yeah.
But first, AI in Slovenia.
Yeah, AI in Slovenia is, well, it's easy to answer because I was there from the very start as a high school kid, right, with 16 years, in 83, right, so we were 5, I think, or 6 people. Certainly this tradition, right, of Slovenian AI helps. Just understanding AI is coming in waves. Was kind of mostly below the radar, right, and then was a little bit of a hype, and then was AI winter, and went up again around September 11, right. This was kind of popular time, big investment, then went again down, and now after 2010 this deep learning kind of made a big difference. Now I would still feel a little bit of saturation or a little bit of overselling of current AI, but there's a lot of capacity still. There's a lot of things to be covered, and probably for the next 5-10 years easily we can count on AI to be popular. And AI by itself is changing, by the way. It's not AI of yesterday, it's not AI of tomorrow. Yeah? Now, Slovenian place in this is just this pretty good broad understanding of what AI is. Today, if you ask youngsters what is AI, AI means, okay, let's go to, I don't know, TensorFlow or to one of these popular sites, download the best free package, get some data from somewhere, drop it in, wait for a little bit, and you get results. And amazingly, you get results which were unachievable like 10 years ago, right? Okay, this is good news, right, on one side. What's the bad news about this? This is, what the definition of chaos is, right? Definition of chaos is that with a small move somewhere, right, in a function, typically y is function of x, right? Very small move in x produces huge move in y, right? So small move here produces huge impact somewhere else. This is happening with AI these days, by the way. So high school kid or undergrad student with not so much knowledge actually can do in short time, can achieve results which were unachievable 10 years ago. And this is very close to the definition of chaos, right? That's why it needs regulation, basically. This is a pretty serious statement. It's not even a joke, right? I mean, likewise, I mean, you were mentioning Facebook, right? So your newsfeed function, so I know some of your people which are tuning these algorithms, right? And they are well aware that a small change in this algorithm can, well, change public opinions, right? Or can clash with the values unknowingly, even with all good intentions. But since it's such a complex system, it's small changes, a little bit of change in weights or something can actually cause dramatic differences, right? Even this old excuse which you mentioned before, right? Tell me whom you socialize with, and I will tell you who you are, right? This was your excuse before for why, right? Yes, it's socially driven, right? But societies are not necessarily the same as, let's say, our Western culture, which we know I remember this, my friend from New York, from Facebook office, who was tuning functions for Indian market and for Eastern markets. He said, well, these people function differently. We need to be very careful what to show. This simple example might not be, I mean, this excuse, right? So, well, we are just showing you what your friends are interested in, right? Might not be always the right one, right? So this is why we are coming now to the need for regulation, right? Regulation, so I'm happen to be, you know, although I'm kind of this old AI geek, right? Still doing programming, by the way, here and there. Happen to be on a couple of regulation committees, right? So I'm in OECD, even basically I wrote the OECD AI definition, which was adopted later by European Commission. These 3 sentences, which made a long way in the meantime. Then I'm in country representative in Council of Europe AI, this in IRCAI. I'm involved in Unesco, then GPI, and occasionally in UN, right? So these are international organizations which are dealing with AI. And the European Commission, okay, I'm less involved, but through the ministry I see what's happening there. A couple of observations. So there's big overlap of people actually in all these organizations. Once you, if you see one, you think, oh, well, this is this set of people. But then if you see a second and third one, you see that actually it's pretty much almost the same set of people sitting in all these organizations and thinking in roughly the same direction, right? This is one small observation which nobody would tell you about this, right? So we became, after now 2-3 years, actually friends with many. And these are people from typically big tech and country representatives, so policymakers usually. So what's another observation? There's a big number of lawyers and policymakers, right? But not too many technicians. I'm one of the rare ones, so that's why they gave me the, like, you should write the AI definition, lawyers can do it because they don't understand really AI. Right? This was the exact excuse why I got this working group for AI definition, and then, okay, for 8 months we were changing these 3 sentences, and even 10 minutes before the final vote, right, we were still changing these 3 sentences. This was, for me, interesting experience. But on the other side, so having technical people on one side, policymakers, and mostly lawyers, right, on the other side, it's huge gap of terminology, understanding what's important, what's not important, and even understanding such a simple word. I mean, anybody who's touched a bit natural sciences, right? So the world model, modeling something, right? The world model, this is the core, right? Model is just something you don't need even to explain. So after 2-3 meetings when we were using this, the world model, the head of the committee came to me and she said, well, could you just tell me what is this, the word model, what does it mean? I mean, we don't use this, right? So there was such a gap, right? Semantic gap, or cultural gap, if you want. Community gap would be better to say. So need for regulation, yes, but I would say for the last 2-3 years, we were more like learning about each other's problems, right? And now if we just briefly go through international organizations, OECD is focused more like on business economy, right? UNESCO, ethics, lots of philosophy. Then Council of Europe, extremely political, right? Human rights. Although similar people discussing the whole thing, right? European Commission, extremely important because will likely come with legally binding document the same time as Council of Europe, right? And we are still learning. I would say this is, I think, honest example. We are learning about the domain of AI, which is while we talk, it's changing, right? And basically what I try to bring into these discussions is, well, to update people about AI, which is happening right now and which may happen in the year or 2 from now, right? Not to prevent the discussions about AI, which, well, used to be there 5 years ago, right? So this is often my role, and I think it's well perceived. It's complicated, right? Sometimes to explain all these details, right? AI as we know it today, or what typical AI is, this narrow AI, which everybody's looking, oh, how nice, does face recognition and so on. But this is really narrow, simple AI, performing complex functions, but it's really narrow, right? So the AI which we may expect and which will really control our lives is this holistic AI, which will control complete systems. And the Facebook is a good example of this, right? Because this is holistic thing what you do, right? Especially you have very broad impacts, right? So changing one function on one spot, the whole community is changing, right? So this is, you need to observe the systems in way more, not in far from narrow way, right? So especially impacts are very broad, right? Yeah, the need for regulation, yes. I mean, it was interesting for you to listen that you were a little bit unhappy with this more or less draft AI Act now at this stage still, which is in the discussion. I think this is consequence of few years of discussions on various ends, and certainly it's not the final one. It's really this risk-based approach. Why? Because this risk-based approach is something which is good balance between lawyers and technical people. It's kind of, we found each other's along this terminology. This was kind of, and now we are still discussing first how to measure what the risks are, and what's the hardest is actually what are the consequences. These are, we can just imagine what the consequences are, but actually sometimes it's really hard to understand. Like Facebook wouldn't know changing this function here along the way. It's like a domino effect. Who will be hit by this small change? It's really hard sometimes to understand. Like job market and many others, right? Yeah, not to be too long, right? Not sure if I answered any of your questions, but it was at least interesting to discuss.
If you may switch your mic. Thank you, Marko, you did. And you actually addressed some of the forthcoming questions in the next round, so maybe we will skip you or give you something else. But let me now move to our Slovenian Minister of Public Administration, Mr. Boštjan Koritnik, and ask you to comment a little bit from the point of view of Slovenia. So Slovenia is taking pride of having one of the most developed AI ecosystems in Europe. At least this is what we think as AI researchers, and we believe, claiming to have the largest number of AI researchers per capita, which, with 2 million population, however you see it, but again, we are very proud of that. And what is interesting actually here for us to hear about a little bit about AI strategy of the country, what is the goal, how do you see also investment, which we also heard about from the other countries in AI literacy, education on digital. So please.
Thank you very much also for inviting me into this really interesting panel. Whatever I do, I will sound boring after Marko's presentation, so excuse me for that. Well, Slovenia and AI, I've been told that we have 40 years of experience, of research experience in the field, and I was always wondering why 40 years. Marko said it's since he was 16, so now I figured it out. So it's since Marko was an AI geek and becoming the AI geek. We also have 30 years of education experience, higher education experience in AI. In Slovenia, we have many prominent, eminent scientists working in the field of AI. Of course, Institute Jožef, Stefan has many of them, and we took some European journalists to Cozy Lab, and they were surprised, to say the least, what can be done with radiation therapy, AI, in order to combat cancer. So this is also one field of AI that I wasn't so aware of, and I live in Slovenia, and actually I might say that I wrote my first professional article according to today's standards, it's professional. Then it was like a scientific on artificial intelligence in law. But as we heard, lawyers can't discuss a lot about artificial intelligence when compared to natural scientists. We have more than 100 research groups in the field of AI. They work on expert intelligence systems, computer vision, cybernetics, machine learning, of course, and many other fields. Of course, the reward or the peak of all these 40 years of experience came with the establishment of IRCAI, the International Research Center for Artificial Intelligence under the auspices of Unesco. That was declared, I believe, in March or April this year, of course, after many, many years and efforts given by two of you at least.
3 years, yeah, at least. Yeah.
Okay, and of course, IRCAI will be a coordinator, accelerator for approaches, and of course, gathering good practices and attracting scientists from all over the world to tell them what we already know, that we don't claim to have the highest number of AI researchers per capita. It's a fact, so it's not only a claim, it's a fact. Regarding National Program for Artificial Intelligence, we adopted that this year. It supports concrete measures for research, to ensure research, innovation, and of course deployment and use of AI systems in 6, let's say, most important or areas that are defined as priority. Those are health, industry 4.0, public administration, which I'm really glad, language technologies. Slovenia is a small country, 2 million people, so we have to cherish our language, and AI can really help us with that. Sustainable food production, environment and spatial planning. Of course, that is also in the core. The objective of this strategy is, of course, to promote Slovenia as a center for AI, to attract new researchers, to keep researchers, which is always a core story within public administration, how to attract talents and after that keep them. And I have to say, it's not only about the money. It's also about getting knowledge, skills, enabling those public servants to learn, to give them that opportunity. And this is, let's say, a horizontal story, not only with AI, but with every technological or needed field. We also want to be an attractive environment for researchers, not only digital nomads that come and work, but also for the ones to stay and enjoy the quality of life that we have in Slovenia. It's much easier when they come. After that, they see that it's really great to live here safe, and it's easier to keep them. International cooperation, AI, actually Marko listed everything where we are, almost everywhere. Council of Europe, OECD, United Nations, and so on. And of course, really important thing that I already mentioned is education. We see the digital gap, the knowledge gap, and it's not only in the field of AI. For instance, in our ministry, we have a focus now on elderly and digitalization. It doesn't help that we have e-services really developed if the people don't use it. So that's something that really need to work on. And of course, there have been several measures for primary, secondary school to implement some educational programs regarding digitalization. Of course, the inclusion of AI topics is important, not only in the curricula on higher education level, but also in technology, sciences, and social studies curricula. We cooperate with Institute Jožef Stefan again, really closely in designing those programs. And what we also do in connection with the national program for AI and our Upravna Akademia, so Academy for Administration. We have several initiatives how to reskill public employees, how to raise awareness with the decision makers in the public and private sector, and of course not to forget activities for lifelong learning. This is something that really we focus on. And at the end, I would only like to, let's say, refer to your statement that science is here to serve people. Also politics is here to serve people, but of course deviations are reality. So we also work on putting human-centric AI, and if I may refer, of course, we shouldn't stop innovation.
Excellent, thank you. Before I go to the next and probably the last round of questions, because we are really exhaustive in discussion, which I'm very glad. Let me just add that really in Slovenia we have artificial intelligence at Jozef Stefan Institute at the universities, the strong groups which are independent and doing research in different fields, and also in companies that are taking the prototype solutions or even having their little research departments working there. And of course, European projects help us a lot in that, in research and also in developing prototypes and involving Slovenian companies and industry in the European research. But let's go back to regulations. So we heard a little bit about the Czech view on EU regulations for AI. So let's come to Portugal. So André, can you give us a little bit of some idea? What are your views on the EU regulations on AI, how the current proposal relates to your national strategy, and what would be your suggestion also related to, and involving the next question also, the international data flow and the kind of global approach to that, to have more of the data, to do analysis or whatever we want, to be more global on that.
Thank you for that question. Portugal is obviously welcomes the initiative from the European Commission to go ahead with this contribution for the discussion and for the need for that. We all agree that there's an absolute need for some kind of regulation that creates some boundaries. I think that the discussion about the challenges we are facing is somehow badly perceived or not correctly or adequate, because we tend to overemphasize the negative aspects of the AI. We tend to put the blame on some of the operators, on big tech companies, but the fact is they are just using in their business models a lack of regulation that nobody was able to produce. We cannot blame companies to explore the capacity to extract value from information, but of course there's a challenge here that we need to address, which is we cannot also accept that in some cases, without the existence of boundaries, some limits and some interference with our own privacy, with our own individual rights, can be challenged. So I would say that we tend sometimes to forget, because we assume it as normal, all the benefits. We cannot forget that due to AI and to the democratization of AI, including in all our small business models, we were able to increase the growth rate. The user experience of each one of us is totally different now from 10 years ago. And that is something that we take for granted, but in fact changed the entire competitiveness of the world's economy. And we see that the ones that were able to lead on these areas were much more, are now in a much better position. But there is this probably impossible to solve challenge, which is how to provide a personalized experience without sacrificing somehow access to information. I cannot have something that is tailored for me if I don't give access to that information. The challenge is, how can I make sure that when I'm giving access, there are some boundaries and limitations that I want to follow, or I want them to follow. And it's not clear, and I believe that is why it's taking so long for Europe and for national governments to being able to be consequent with the intention that we all agree, but in fact it's difficult. And it's also difficult for another reason. AI is by nature something dynamic. It's like our brain, it's constantly changing. How can I regulate something that is constantly changing? How can I make sure that in the development and the following up of the algorithms developed by private companies, they are following and being binded by the principles that we as a community want to ensure. And this is something that we also, I believe in this case, there is some kind of misperception, because we tend to transfer, make like an outsourcing of responsibility, blaming these companies and saying, you need to ensure that there is no misinformation, you need to make sure that you respect, but we have no means to be there and to make sure that they are doing so. And we haven't the means at the public level, at the government level, to develop some kind of guard of policy that would somehow, police services that would somehow ensure that they are obliged to follow these principles. So what is the role of the state? What is the role of the European Union and the government states? It's something that truly concerns all of us, and I believe we don't have direct answers, because we are also dealing with the core of the democracy, with the core of our most relevant individual rights. And in these cases, typically, we don't want to delegate this competence on private entities. Since centuries ago, we were able to centralize in the government and in public authorities, because we believe they better protect the public interest, this kind of control. It happened with authorities, with the force, the force security services. It happened with all the sovereignty issues. But in this case, for the first time in ages, we are now reverting the situation. There are now private companies which have a role so important in the society that we need to do something and make sure how we articulate in terms of responsibilities. And it's also something that cannot be solved at the national level. In fact, this is the kind of challenge which is supranational. Internet and the digital environment doesn't have boundaries, as we all know. So it's not possible for a country like Portugal or Slovenia individually to find the solution. It must be at the supranational level. And in this case, Europe, and I believe this contribution is obviously very relevant, because we are now creating the grounds and the platform in which we all agree that should be the basic principles and the basic metrics that we should make sure that every stakeholder is binded for. And finally, I would like also to emphasize another positive aspect about the usage of AI, which is the importance of the capacity to extend human capacity. When we listen to the example that was just referred of application of AI in health sector, and the possibility that we all now recognize to extend the human capacity, for example, of doctors, that we know that we have limited resources, and thanks to AI, we are now much more able to respond to the kind of challenges we find due to the demographic trend and the demographic evolution. We need to extend the capacity of our professionals, and this is obviously something that we welcome, this extended capacity. At the national level, Portugal is obviously totally aligned with the European strategy. As I mentioned, this is a supranational challenge, so it must be treated also at the supranational level. And we have already approved in 2019 our first initial strategy. We are now revisiting this document and updating it. This is something dynamic. We know that, as Marko referred, it's something that the AI today has nothing to do with AI 3 years ago and nothing to do with AI 3 years from now. So we need to be constantly updating. We are now on that process, but with this difficulty, it's not easy to regulate something as intangible, as dynamic as AI. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. So let's jump to business and hear about your views on AI regulations in EU that we are looking at now. How do you see these efforts may influence businesses, and also the issue of international data exchange and you know, the innovation and SMEs we heard, but in general innovation, innovative technologies, how may that be influenced?
Yeah.
And what would be your suggestion for us when we are, whatever influence we have or don't have on the EU regulations, how to go with that?
Well, I'm happy to speak about it. So, I mean, look, it's probably not coming as a surprise. Regulation should be, you know, representing the interests of the public, should be innovation friendly, should be tech literate, ideally, you know, effective. But I want to make a bigger point, and I'm actually surprised how almost identical my thoughts are, similar to the thoughts of the State Secretary here. Because I think we need to sort of, I could spend now an hour, 2 hours, a PhD thesis on how would you change this, how would you change that. But the key point is that we do need regulation for AI. And there are various reasons for that. Reason number one is, I spoke before about the duty to create trust and confidence. Let's be very honest, whatever we do will never be enough as a private company. Yeah? It needs sort of the sanctioning of the state. It needs the democratically elected representatives to set these rules. And the reason, and this is a broader point, not just for AI regulation, it's for digital regulation overall, and you made this point very well, is there are very substantial tensions in these decisions, societal tensions. So you have the tension between, just to list some of them, privacy, free speech, competition, safety, security. And at the moment, you know, and I said this literally, personally, you know, I am in a position to make sometimes decisions about this, about content staying on the platform. And I think as a citizen, I feel very uncomfortable with this. Very, very uncomfortable, because I don't have a mandate to do this. And it does require much more of a guidance, a steer through a government framework. I'm absolutely convinced about it. It's also from a trust perspective, it's wrong, but it's also from a societal perspective wrong that private companies make such highly sensitive decisions. And then there's a very less altruistic point. We are about to invest tens of billions into what's called the metaverse, the future of artificial intelligence, so augmented reality, virtual reality, and so on. I mean, we would like to have some predictability of what the framework looks like, just from that perspective. It's a pure commercial play, you know. Ideally it's good regulation, ideally it's tech literate and so on. But just tell us what it is. That's already a very step forward. So I think that's at the macro level why regulation is really, really important. It's really important for society, and it's really important for us. And you know, there are principles of regulation that we can talk about. And I'm very much with the Deputy Minister here. You know, we need to stop I think regulators need to stop to be product designers and need to stop small businesses from coming, you know, and growing. And we need competitors to us. We need European competitors to us. And I think, I fear this is not necessarily the intention of regulation, that to create the next European Facebook, the next European Google. And I would assume, you know, as a European, that should be the objective of technology regulation. So I think, you know, the principles there, principle-based regulation, one principle is a risk-based approach. You know, we really need to concentrate on the major risks. We can't just sort of try to predict and think what all kinds of risks will be, but we have to have regulation that attaches to the major risks. And then another point, and some people who've heard me the last couple of days or met with me, this is one of my bugbears, is harmonization. I have been in policy making. I've spent 15 years previously in telecoms policy making. We have really worked very, very hard to create more harmonized European regulation. And it took a very long time. And then I look at digital regulation, and we are completely fragmenting. So yes, we have the DMA and the DSA and all that, and then we have national content laws, we have national competition laws, and so on. And in the much more global service, we are becoming ever more fragmented. I mean, that must be one of the main objectives, is to go back to a digital single market, create a single harmonized European platform for regulation, especially on AI regulation. And actually, I think with AI, the bar is even higher. I think that the European standards need to dovetail with international standards. There's almost no alternative. So I think getting there. But my last point is I'm almost lowering the tone now a bit, because we're talking about this lofty, brave new world of algorithms and how we extract all the opportunities and benefits and how we address all the risks of AI. And in reality, we have the here and now to deal with. And there's one thing that has the real potential to stop all of these ideas, all of these potentials, and that is a stop to data flows. So algorithms and AI depend on data flows, on data from many sources, from diverse sources, loads, big amount of anonymous data to trail through it, to spot patterns, to create conclusions. That's what really AI is built on. And we are currently driving towards a cliff in Europe because of a lack of clarity whether actually Europe can exchange data with the United States. I don't go into all the details. This is quite a deeply legal technical debate. It has to do with that the privacy shield, which is the mechanism of data transfer, has been declared invalid. There's a decision coming up in the next month by the data protection agencies on what the future of that is. If we stop data transfer to the US, and then in analogy to all the other regions, we talked about Israel before a lot, we talked about India before, if we do that, we cause enormous damage. It's not just we don't have AI, we just cause enormous damage. And Digital Europe, which is an industry group in Brussels, has sort of evaluated what the impact would be if we would stop data flows. And the impact would be up to 2030 of 1.3 trillion. So that's 12 zeros. Yeah, it's too big to imagine. Impact to the European economy. So that's Spain gone, basically, by 2030. That's what we do to ourselves. So let's just, it's great what we do here. We talk about the future, and then it's important the role that Europe has to play. But let's also talk about the here and now, how we protect actually the digital future of Europe and the benefits of digital in our society.
Excellent, thank you. So let me jump to Marko and ask about the same issue from the research point of view, which is the issue of, Europe not be willing to share data with US companies. And if you as a researcher get into a situation that your data is less diverse, that you have to work with the local data, does it influence, in which way do you think it can influence the models and the outcome?
Yeah, well, for research itself, I think it's not that critical. It's true that, of course, dealing with global data, it's exciting and so on, but it's true that not many people have actually access to global data streams, right? I think what you were explaining, it's more important for the service, right? Just for research itself, when you're developing ideas and so on, you depend a little bit less. I think much bigger trouble is really when to get, even without all these constraints and regulations, right, to get access to this kind of data, independent of the legal troubles. Although it's true that we work with global data all the time, but they're usually not problematic ones, like, I don't know, whole corpus of everything, what was done ever in academia. Well, everybody can download it. Well, it's no problem, right? Just 0.5 terabyte, I mean, one memory key, really. I mean, this is, today, it's really one memory key, everything what humanity produced, right? And so on, and many other global data sources, but the problematic ones, right, when which can really hurt particular nations in a time of crisis, which we hope it won't come, but I think this is really just preparation for the case that something will break in the future, right? Resilience and the rest, what we are optimizing here, this is where this kind of, let's say, or abuse, right, this is where this legislation would help. So this is like more like I see it as a precautionary measure, not really to defend Europe from US or anybody else. It's true now we have, well, we had this crisis like 12 years ago. Now we have a little bit of this crisis with COVID and so on. And the whole world got a little bit scared, right? And this is one reason. And the other reason is this uncertain future, exactly about this chaotic nature of the very fast development. This is, I think, the biggest fear which is driving this regulations. So just going back to your question, right? So we researchers, I think we are not hurt really. I think we can operate independently, and you know, since we researchers we are poor, right? Nobody can sue us. I mean, they can, but they cannot get nothing out of us, right? So this is, and we can easily operate in this gray zone. This is my academic hat, right? Now, commercial hat, of course, it's different, right? And there, yeah, we feel some consequences here and there, but it really depends in which business you are. So yeah, so much, not to be too long. So I think academia is pretty safe. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Just a quick chance if you want to add any comment on this international data flow or regulation.
I will try to be really quick. I just coming back to the first panel we had today with the minister Andrejanic. Sorry, my fault.
One of those names.
Sorry, and actually we spoke also with the colleagues from Atlantic Council about transatlantic relation because actually what Markus mentioned, actually this is one great misunderstanding that from my point of view, as I understood it, is also a result of actually quite shaky transatlantic relation in the last years. So maybe it would be better if the two parts of the Atlantic would speak more intensively on technology, big tech, AI issues more intensively. Then we wouldn't be in this situation. Maybe the solution would be already on the table. You wouldn't be so nervous, and the trillions of euros wouldn't be lost potentially. So in that, my only comment is that actually we are really welcoming the creation of this Trade and Technology Council, as I was mentioning in the morning. And actually, as was I think it was Francis that was mentioning in the morning, that it's not enough to create platform, but we need to be engaged and to really make it working, to create processes, to create actually commitments that this platform will really be operational and functional. And I think if this happens, then we can solve this kind of problems that is here in a much more flexible way. And let's face it, probably in the near future we will actually solve many other topics that are actually related to the fact that actually the biggest big tech companies, the biggest big tech, are actually in the US. So it would be a pity if it were in Europe we would be angry about that. It's better to cooperate because actually, as we also mentioned in the morning, actually there are other parts of Europe, other parts of the world, and we need to be actually as much aligned as possible on the transatlantic relation. So this is just like repeating what was said in the morning, but it's, I think, very relevant to this discussion too.
Yes, thank you. And not necessarily everyone who is sitting now here was there in the morning, so thank you for this. And the last question, actually, the chance to comment on how do you see that EU regulations on AI can potentially influence competitiveness of EU in a global way. Also, the calls for data localization, how can then potentially influence EU having a leading role in innovative technologies, and where you expect AI regulations to be how they are going to progress to the Slovenian EU presidency. So any of this, if you would like to give us some feedback.
I will be really quick and frank. Of course, artificial intelligence is an important building block of Europe's digital future, and what we heard today already, trust is the key. So we have to create high level of trust into the AI. It should be developed in a way that is responsible, focused on common interest and on people. Of course, what I repeat all the time, and I have to be an honest broker in this position that Slovenia is now, the new rules should be applied directly in the same way across the member states, and this is how we create a unified and trustworthy environment. What is required, and we heard that from actually all the participants, is a balanced regulatory approach. Nobody told that regulation is not necessary. On the contrary, it's necessary, but it has to be balanced, and it has to safeguard fundamental rights. On one side, we'll always talk about the European principles, way of life, European model of sport. It's all European, and of course, it shouldn't stifle innovation. In order to be competitive, what we should do, the same thing as in any other area, invest more, so more investment, maximize investment in research. Slovenia is really not at the peak regarding the share of GDP, but it's growing. Of course, we should, what I already mentioned today, retain, attract researchers. We should create more synergies and networks internationally. IRCAI will of course do the major part in that. And in addition, we should focus on digital skills to fill all the competence gaps. Firstly, we were talking about competence gaps, digital gap. Now we see that actually it has social impact. Also, it's poverty gap if you're not connected and if you're not skilled. So for the last thing you asked, Slovenia's ambition, of course we aim with the AI Act to achieve as much progress in the Council as possible, and maybe general approach is optimistic, but if you don't dream, you don't reach the dreams. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Yes, we should dream big to reach something. I would like to open the floor for the audience. We have also a mic if someone has a question. And it can be a general question, and then we will see whoever feels like from our panelists to respond. Thank you.
Irina Mlinarić-Raščan is my name. I am the Dean of the Faculty of Pharmacy and also the National UNESCO President. So involved in the IRCAI somehow. Data flow. Are all the data just data? That is the question. Data are personalized data, genomic data, consumers data, social habits data. So the data flow for me has a very many different aspects. And obviously for personalized medicine, we have decided that the samples of patients and individuals do not cross borders, even not for the research. It doesn't really make sense because if the data